We now come to the second oral question. Lord Austin of Dudley.
I beg leave to ask the question standing in my name on the order paper.
Lord Parkinson of Whitley Bay.
Universities are independent and autonomous organisations. Accordingly, the government has not intervened directly in this case. But we understand that we consider that the University of Bristol could do more to make its condemnation of Professor Miller's conduct clear to current and future students. Students also can and should inform the police if they believe the law has been broken. Professor Miller has expressed some ill-founded and reprehensible views, and the government wholeheartedly rejects them.
Lord Austin of Dudley.
Academics do have freedom of speech, including to criticise Israel, but Professor Miller does not have the right to attack Jewish students as part of an Israel lobby group which makes Arab and Muslim students unsafe. And Bristol should not be employing someone to teach students wild conspiracy theories about Jewish people. His behaviour has resulted in Jewish students being subject to weeks of harassment and abuse. Bristol must support their students and take this much more seriously.
Well, the noble lord gets to the nub of the issue with his questions. Academics, of course, have the right to espouse views which many might find offensive, perhaps even idiotic, and universities should be places where such views can be rigorously and vigorously debated. What makes this case concerning is Professor Miller's comments about his own students, suggesting that their disagreement with his views is because they are political pawns of a foreign government or part of a Zionist enemy which has no place in any society. The International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism draws the important distinction between legitimate criticism of the government of Israel and its policies and holding Jews collectively responsible for that. We're glad that the University of Bristol has adopted that definition and hope they will consider it carefully.
Lord Mendelssohn.
My Lords, I'd like to draw my attention to my register of interests, including the fact that I'm on the Advisory Council of the Hillel Foundation, which supports Jewish students at universities. My Lords, does the Noble Lord the Minister agree that the university's leadership's failure to act to protect its own students, over whom it has a duty of care, breaches 3 out of the 4 regulatory objectives of the Office for Students? And can he provide reassurance this will be taken into consideration in any evaluation by the Office for Students? And this also would include addressing and evaluating the performance of the university leadership and confidence in their ability to continue to lead.
Is right, providers have a duty of care to students which the government expects them to take very seriously. All registered higher education providers, including the University of Bristol, are subject to ongoing conditions of registration with the Office for Students, which is responsible for ensuring compliance with them. In addition, students can notify the Office for Students of any issues which they think may be of regulatory interest to it, and the OFS has provided a guide for students to support them in this process.
Lord Lee of Hurley.
In a written reply to my noble friend Lord Austin last week, my noble friend the Minister said, all higher education providers should discharge their responsibilities fully and have robust policies and procedures in place to comply with the law. So will he or the Universities Minister now write to the universities who employ the academics who signed a letter of support for Professor Miller of Bristol University, asking them what action they are taking in respect of those academics who appear to be supporting Professor Miller's anti-Semitism as defined by the aforementioned IHRA?
Well, universities and other providers are independent institutions responsible for their own staffing decisions. They're responsible for meeting their duties under the law, both regarding to freedom of expression and to equality. But the government has been clear that we expect universities to be at the forefront of tackling anti-Semitism and ensuring they provide a welcoming experience for all students. That's why my Right Honourable friend, the Education Secretary, wrote to providers encouraging them to adopt the IHRA definition, as a result of which I'm pleased to say more than 50 additional institutions have already done so.
Baroness Ludford.
My Lords, on that point of a welcoming environment for Jewish students, the University of Bristol, when it made a statement on its investigation, said its clear and consistently held position is that bullying, harassment and discrimination are never acceptable. We remain committed to providing a positive experience for all our students and staff, including by providing a welcoming environment for Jewish students. Now, that is not happening at that university, and sadly at all too many other universities. When we had the debate initiated by the Noble Lady Baroness Deach, who follows me today, in January, I think it was her who said that some universities were becoming no-go areas for Jewish students. This is surely intolerable, and there is a systemic problem here, and I would like to hear the Minister say how he's going to tackle that.
It's an extremely long question. Could I please ask Noble Lords to keep their questions short, as a lot of people want to get in and express their views?
Well, the Noble Lady refers to the important, if dispiriting, debate which was held in Grand Committee in January this year, looking at incidences of anti-Semitism in universities. The government's very mindful of that. That's why my right honourable friend, the Education Secretary, has, in his most recent strategic guidance letter, asked the Office for Students to consider a scoping exercise to identify providers which are reluctant to adopt the IHRA definition.
Baroness Deach.
Sadly, the situation at Bristol has been ongoing for over 2 years since students first complained, and the university has stonewalled until this week. Jewish students have been verbally and physically abused at that university previously. The failure to act shows that anti-Semitism is not taken seriously. Had a professor hurled similar abuse and conspiracy theories at black students, he would have been off campus by the evening. Will the Minister ensure that the relevant student bodies take anti-Semitism as seriously as they do other forms of racism, namely the OFS, the National Union of Students, and the Universities UK?
Well, my lords, the government most certainly takes anti-Semitism seriously, and my right honourable friend, the Education Secretary's letter also asked the Office for Students to consider introducing mandatory reporting of anti-Semitic incident numbers by providers with the aim of ensuring a robust evidence base to make sure that appropriate action is being taken.
Lord Pickles.
My Lords, I draw attention to my entry in the Register of Interest. Does my noble friend agree that Bristol University adopting the IRA working definition on anti-Semitism is only the first step? A work programme would reasonably seek to establish a safe space for Jewish students so that they can learn in a free and open environment. Bristol University has failed to offer safety, reassurance, or even the slightest suggestion of competence. Does my noble friend agree that the university must condemn Professor Miller's statement that Jewish students were directed by the Israeli government and take the necessary action to restore the public's lost confidence in Bristol University?
Well, I first pay tribute to my noble friend's work on the IHRA definition and getting a number of bodies, including Her Majesty's Government, to sign up to it. He's right that adoption of that working definition is only a first step. While the government thinks it is a vital one, it's not enough on its own. And that's why we continue to work with the sector to make sure that they are doing everything they can to stamp out anti-Semitism.
Lord Panic.
For attention to my registered interests, and I very much welcome the Minister's comments. Has he noted that Professor Miller has suggested that by joining a university Jewish society, students are thereby associating themselves with racism and with Islamophobia? Will he note that many students join Jewish societies because they wish to attend religious services, they wish to go to parties, they may simply wish to have a nourishing and regular bowl of chicken soup?
I completely agree with the noble lord. That I say is what's at the heart of this issue. It implies that joining a Jewish society means that Professor Miller can understand the motivations or the political views of Jewish students at the University of Bristol. We think that is wrong. We think that's very ill-founded, and that's what causes us such concern in this case.
Lord Bassam of Brighton.
My Lord, this is an appalling case, but does the Noble Lord the Minister share my concern that the government's proposals for free speech legislation run the risk of protecting statements that are anti-Semitic and offensive and dangerous? And can he clarify what role the government would expect the free speech champion to play in cases such as this one? And what protection and priority would be given to student welfare under the proposals to ensure Jewish students do feel safe from anti-Semitic abuse?
Well, my lords, people go to university to be provoked and challenged, to come into contact with ideas and opinions which may be different to those that they've encountered before. They might find those ideas fatuous or even offensive, but that is part and parcel of the academic experience. Our proposals for Free Speech Champion are to ensure that free speech is being protected on campus, that essential part of university experience is maintained, and that universities are balancing their legal obligations to safeguard the freedom of expression whilst also tackling any abuse, harassment or intimidation of students which is contrary to the law.